what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Collider Interview Studio at TIFF 2024 at the Cinema Center, brought to you by Range Rover Sport. I'm so excited to talk to listeners. I said this to you off camera. I promised I would repeat it again when we were recording. I've seen 2 episodes of your series, and I find it so enthralling and fascinating, and I desperately needed answers. So Jordan immediately downloaded your audiobook, and now I'm 3/4 of the way through. So I don't quite know where everything ends, but my God, what a captivating story.
Oh, thank you so much.
Clearly, I know about the listeners, but because it's a festival premiere, a lot of our viewers will not know about it just yet. So, Jordan, I'll give you these duties as the author of the book. Would you mind giving a brief synopsis of your story?
Sure, yes. So, listeners centers around Claire, who begins to hear a low humming sound that nobody else in her life can hear. Not her friends, not her family, or her colleagues at work, where she's a teacher at school. And it slowly begins to unravel her life, her sanity, her marriage, until she discovers that a student of hers and then gradually disparate neighbors of hers also hear this hum. And it implicates her in a pretty wild world of conspiracy and faith and mania.
Job well done. You were very prepared for that. I have many a question about adapting your book to the series format. So obviously a very, very experienced writer. This marks your first time writing a limited series. So I am curious, is there any particular writing learning curve you experienced writing for that format?
Absolutely. I think you have to not be precious with anything. I mean, it's a lot of iterative drafts, and I mean, it's a story that I've lived inside now for almost 8 years. So it's a story that I know really well, and it can actually feel quite plastic, quite elastic. Like it can actually be told in so many different ways. And we tried a bunch of them and found the best one, I think. But yeah, just not being precious and also being able to be really responsive to the amazing ideas that I was being thrown, particularly by Janicza, who had some amazing visions for this project.
Oh, I have so many follow-ups. First, I'll follow up on the idea of not being precious about it. Can you tell me one element of your original book that you had to be precious about and you held tight to it, but then also something that you really wanted to include in the show, but came to realize, no, this does not serve this story in the series format as well?
Interesting question. Well, for me, the sort of non-negotiable thing is Claire's interior world and journey and primacy in the piece. I mean, I think what the film does, perhaps even better than the book, is really center her thought process and her kind of gradual descent into this kind of madness, perhaps but also a very kind of empathetic thinking. I think we're really with her as she kind of moves through the challenges of this kind of terrible condition, terrible experience, and ultimately a kind of revelatory experience, perhaps for her even. In terms of things that were jettisoned, I mean, I think ultimately the book is set in sort of somewhere in the kind of American Southwest, and we transpose the story to Britain, which I think actually, at first I thought, what are we going to lose in that process? But I think we actually found a lot, and I think it's a different story, and I think it showed me that actually the story is something of a parable and could probably be resituated in a number of different places around the world, and it would be unique each time.
This was one of the first things I was thinking about while reading the book. It almost could have like an anthology concept where you can do this story with this family, these people, and then literally take it anywhere else in the world and have a completely different experience. And I find that very exciting. So digging into your collaboration now, because I know you were saying that Janicza found some new stuff and you kind of evolved it along the way. What would you two say is the biggest difference between, I guess, the draft of this script you two started with together and the show you ended up with that everyone's going to see?
I think with anything, the experience of reading it, the experience of making it, and then the final product, there's so many stages of rewriting that it goes through, right? And I think in either iteration that we had created, until there was Rebecca, it didn't really exist. And once there was Rebecca, she's so connected to the DNA of the piece. Like it is, it's a piece of all of us. But I just think the final version of it is just so her. I've looked at her face so much for the last year that when I saw her yesterday, I hadn't seen her in a year, but it felt like I had, because I had memorized so much.
Anticlimactic.
Yeah, it was a little anticlimactic. And I was trying to explain to her that like I was meeting her at a lull only because I'm like, I had just looked at her face actually right before I walked into seeing her in a room, and it was odd. It felt sort of strange because I was like, oh.
Made me a tad self-conscious. Like, do you see how tired I am right now?
I was like, no, it's just I know you so intimately. I don't know that that's really answered your question, but it's
it definitely does.
Yeah, exactly.
It definitely does. And like you feel that you make the role uniquely your own. I got a big 2-part question about first signing on for this. When this opportunity first came your way, what was the single thing about it that you were most excited to get to do? But then can you also tell me something that wound up being more creatively fulfilling than you ever could have imagined at the start?
Those are 2 big questions.
Go.
Okay. Well, I actually decided that I really wanted to do it before I read a single word of the script, if I'm being completely truthful. That's not me blowing smoke up these guys behind. It's just the way it was, and one of my agents said to me, there is a project out there. It's a limited, and it's about a woman who starts hearing a hum that nobody else can hear. And it's directed by Janicza Bravo. And I was like, that sentence, I'll take it. I want that job. Because I just thought there's something before I'd even read the material, I was already so compelled by the idea, of something so banal and minuscule. Like, what does that do to a person if they can't stop hearing something? And it's not a situation of like you block your ears and then you hear it inside your head. It's clearly outside. Like, what does that do to how you recontextualize your whole environment, all of your choices, how you see the world? I think we're constantly living in this sort of reality where we look at everything and see it one way, and sometimes weird things can happen and make you see everything completely differently. Whether it's like, I recently painted my house and suddenly I'm like, oh, my house looks completely different. It's just that. It's like these tiny things throwing your sort of understanding of humanity into question, I think is a really potent idea. And then I read the script and I sort of all my hopes for it were fulfilled. Like, I was like, okay, this is actually what I want it to be, and it is the thing that I thought it might be. And so I was just really excited to do it because and also it's, I don't know, what was the other question?
Something that was more creatively fulfilling than you ever could have imagined at the start. Like something you found along the way while exploring the material further.
I think there's a criteria for me for things that sort of feel appealing. I recently saw an old interview with Philip Seymour Hoffman saying exactly what I've been trying to articulate for years, where he said, sometimes you just want to force a crisis. It's not about being challenged. You want a crisis because a challenge implies like courage and valor, and that's not what you're thinking. Sometimes you just want a situation where you're forced to actually get right up to humiliating yourself in front of humans. And in a crisis, you have to like go up there and you have to do it. You have to follow through because it's a crisis. So you don't have any choice. And, I think that's a really brilliant way of articulating the thing that I'm always looking for. Like, does this scare me in some way? Is there a possibility that I'm going to be embarrassed on set doing this? Yes, absolutely. Is there a possibility that I'm going to feel incredibly vulnerable? Yes. Then if you go there, if you do those things, then you do get creatively fulfilled in a way that you don't anticipate, and you do push yourself further than you even really understand. And I think that's the truth of what this was for me.
I'll follow up on that briefly. Of all of the incredible roles you've played, what was the scariest of the bunch, and how does this one compare?
I mean, I don't know if scary is the wrong word. Again, they're all like mini crises, aren't they? It's like, I don't know that I can pit them against each other in that way.
Fair enough.
I will say that this has been one of the more fulfilling jobs of my life, like without question. Something about the alchemy of these two people sitting here, like all of us on this couch, it had a special flavor to it that I have so much respect for Janicza Bravo, like so much. She's a mad visionary,
I make her say my whole name,
True.
just so you guys know. I make her say my whole name.
I always say her whole name. It's Janicza Bravo.
Yeah.
I just really like
Everyone
saying
should
her whole
know
name
the
because
whole name by
she's
now.
very
I'm fine
important
with
to me,
it.
so I want to say the whole name. And Jordan, I didn't know his work before this, and now I do, and I'm so in awe of it, and I have so much respect for him also. I don't know, I don't know. I'd be really happy working with these two for the rest of my life, honestly.
I'm fine with that. I want you to do everything and anything, but I'm happy with continuing this trio as long as possible. Janicza, I want to come back your way because I was lucky enough to get to talk to you about Zola at Sundance a couple of years ago, and I was very eager to see another feature film from you. But you veered.
Me too.
You veered. Well, there's kind of my question. You veered towards the TV format instead. Is there anything particular about that format that's calling to you, or is it more about kind of like the nature of the industry and where those waves push you?
I think it's. I've been fortunate enough to go where I want to go. Not just go where I am desired, but go where I desire. I've like found myself in this pocket where there really is very little that I've worked on where I haven't actually wanted to be there. I really struggle with showing up if it's not turning me on. And I've tried that and it's just it's a bad recipe. Like things, I start shutting down in a way that I didn't even know was possible, actually. And so after Zola, what I most wanted, I think what I was most craving was to differentiate myself from whatever that movie might have decided about me. And there were things that came my way that felt like variations on the same theme. And, actually, my manager had put this in front of me. It had come my way and he'd put it in front of me. And I think I was overwhelmed and wasn't looking at things. And he sort of reminded me about it again. And also articulated that I wasn't the first and only choice. And I was like, understood. And I read it and I really fell for it. And I think what turned me on the most was that it scared me and it made me a little uncomfortable. And I wasn't sure if I could land it. And I was like, yeah, so I should go there. If it's making me a little worried, that feels right.
So you feel worried jumping into it, and then you come to the conclusion that you should direct every single episode of.
Yeah.
I am curious because more often than not, when it comes to any series, whether it's limited or not, we do often see a bunch of directors work on something. Why did this particular story benefit from having one voice as a director?
You know, I did want to make another film, and I'm not very good at giving 100% of myself to multiple things at a time. And so the pandemic had affected the flow of how Zola was meant to like leave my body. And so by the time it actually left my body, there was this gap. And in that gap, I had the opportunity to walk through the door of like continuing the road of making the next film that I wanted to make, or the listeners was there and it existed and it had a home. And I liked it. I loved it. And so I just went towards that. But it felt like a film to me, you know, and I think we all approached it in that way. And I also sort of, I feel it's important to articulate because I know I keep saying I approached it like a film, but I don't want to say that because I think television is diminutive. But my experience in TV had always been episodic. So it's kind of the Airbnb experience, you know, it's like you're there for a week, it feels nice, then you leave, you rate it. And so this was an opportunity to immerse myself in the entire arc of the experience. And so it did feel more like a film only because I did all of the episodes and was with it from its infancy till its birth, which I guess is happening today.
Well, given how I feel about the first two episodes, I think that was the
Infancy
right
to birth.
route to
I
go.
said that in the wrong order. But you understand what I was like, wait a minute,
I've said many
guys.
things in the wrong order on this trip. It is fine.
But it seemed
It's
right.
fine.
But I was like, that's not right. It's sort of like now it's going outside.
Yeah. Okay. I'll
We had
take that.
homeschooled and now we're going to regular school.
All of this makes so much sense to me. What doesn't fully make sense to me yet, appropriately so, is the hum. I have a couple of questions about that. First, Rebecca, for you, from a character perspective, and I'm learning a little bit about the book in terms of, you know, details the book is giving me about their past that the show thus far hasn't given me. So I am curious, what kind of backstory do you have to do for your character to kind of, I guess, establish that foundation so that when we know the hum appears and has shattered that foundation, it still means something to a newcomer?
I didn't do a lot of like that sort of work. I didn't, because I felt something that was not the most, but very important about Claire is that she could be any of us. And when you sort of approach a character like that, I tend to think, well, then she's going to be me. She's going to be a version of myself. I mean, I very rarely get to sound like I sound. And this is one of the few things that I sound like I sound when I talk, So I sort of took that as my, I'm just going to
English.
do. Yeah.
I forgot.
I'm just going to sound a sense. So I didn't do that much backstory as much as like just try and bring me to it and then let myself live the experience, really, is the truth of it. There wasn't that much else to think about.
So I feel like
that sounds really lazy.
Yeah, it's like, wow, do the homework.
I feel like I can hear the hum and feel what it's doing to her through your performance. Now I kind of want to loop in working with your composer and the sound team, because I'm curious about the kinds of conversations you have just in terms of using those elements to make sure the audience thinks they can hear it, but without literally hearing it, which I just found that shockingly effective here.
Oh, that's thank you. I think we talked so much about from like the offset, the experience of, I think I wanted to slightly invalidate her experience, because that's what Claire was going through, was that no one believed her. And so the question of when do we get to invite the audience into hearing it, but also peppering it in so that it feels slightly false to them too, right? It isn't so present that they're wondering, but is it my house or is it the show or what's happening? Am I okay? I think I wanted us all to question our own sense of what is and isn't there. And both the composer Dev Hines and our sound designer Steve Hannigan were like so intimately involved in how we built it, also because it is an extension of Claire, right? And it is also at the foundation of the world that Jordan built. It's like very much like the house stands on that.
It's too effective. When I stopped watching it, I felt like, I mean, I'm sure this is intentional, like I took it with me and I was second guessing what I was hearing.
You start to
and
realize
also
that you
the
might
millions,
hear stuff, right?
The millions
that's
of
not
other
there.
things that I obsess over, like a tiny little thing, even like visually, that can completely change how I operate and topple my world. Jordan, one question for you now, just in terms of the adaptation process, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but it is one of my favorite things about sharing something you have created with other artists, is the opportunity to kind of, find new corners or find new ways to appreciate something you created through a director like Janicza and an actor like Rebecca. Is there any particular thing about your story you have come to love more by seeing it adapted into a limited series?
Absolutely, yeah. Great question. Well, just to vouch for what has already been said, I mean, Janicza is a true visionary. And I think what she was really encouraging me to do from the outset was to think of the story imagistically, both obviously sonically, which, is sort of embedded in the material, but also through bold images and bold sequences that may not even exist in the novel. And so I think there's a way in which Claire's emotional journey and her sort of psychic journey gets us in pretty intense places. And we want to be able to see that, not just kind of watching her through a kind of passive realism, but trying to kind of get under the skin of that journey a little bit more through cinema, through bold imagery, which Janicza is so adept at creating. And so that was perhaps, I think, the thing that I feel most it's one of several things that are different than the book that I am so proud of. I think work really effectively in the series.
I love it. Before I let you go, I have one unrelated question for you, Rebecca, because I love passing. Many people out there love passing. You are directing another film, but in that particular case, you're not just directing it, you're also acting in it. So I am curious, while prepping, I believe, for that, how do you expect your process to change when wearing two hats on that production?
I don't know. Ask me in a couple of years.
I want the answer now, and then compare the answer after the fact.
Oh yeah, that's
actually
good.
Could
actually,
be kind of interesting.
Yeah, you can play it back.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like the next frontier. I don't know. I've got no idea how it's going to go down, and I don't even know when I'm going to make that movie. So I don't know. There might be something else before that. Actually,
we like to. Oh, okay. I mean, I'll take literally anything you want to direct, but we like to manifest things in Collider Interview Studios. So I want that to happen ASAP.
I do too, yeah.
I just want anything from all three of you to happen. I want more of these episodes to just like be in my eyeballs right now. You stressed me out, and I feel like that is a sign of a great success with a show like this. So huge congratulations on the listeners. Thank you for sharing some of your experience with us.
Thank you.